from the Buddhist perspective, the end result is positive or negative. The end result, positive or negative, of all actions of body, speech, and mind is actually dependent on the original motivation that we're going to set right now. So if the motivation is good, that means focused on the positive benefit for yourself and for others around you, it'll eventually result in a positive outcome. That's actually called the functioning of karma. Although we can't be sure, ordinary people like me anyways, can't be sure exactly when or what that positive outcome will be. And the greater the intended benefit that we set in the motivation, and this is kind of an exercise in expanding the mind in a way. So the greater intended benefit, the greater the potential positive outcome. So even if we lose track of our motivation or become distracted, a positive motivation keeps the tenor of the entire session positive. And if our actions of body, speech, and mind are guided by a positive motivation, that generates virtuous karma. And we're going to take advantage of that at the end of the session, and I'll explain why when we get there. So really, just to set the tone for tonight, this is what our intention is going to be. It's like, due to the merits of the virtuous actions that we're going to do tonight, just listening to the Buddhist perspective on meditation, thinking about it, actually meditating, and so on, we're going to use that as a dedication at the end, in the hope that we'll quickly attain the state of a Buddha. And having that state, the most optimal state of all, that means we'll be able to lead all living beings without exception into that same state. So that's called a Mahayana, or great vehicle motivation. So let's use this verse then to just try and expand our mind a little bit. This is from the 10th chapter of The Way of the Bodhisattva, a text by a great master called Shantideva. And in fact, it's the motto of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. For as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain, until then may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. Well, thank you. And I thought I would go through a quick review. I just ask if you hold any questions until the review is finished. I'll go through this. I'll just go through it as quickly as I can. And then we can go to the new material tonight. So we've been talking about mental factors. And what they are is they're a component of the mind. You can think of them as an aspect, a characteristic, a quality or ability of your mind, of anyone's mind, that apprehends or engages with the meditation object, whatever you're thinking about at the time. For example, and so those examples of those mental factors might be mindfulness, which is the primary one we're learning about tonight, but also concentration, wisdom, and introspective awareness. So there are 4 mental factors that we're really focusing on. So what mindfulness is, and this might be different from other definitions you've heard, this is the classical Indian definition. Mindfulness is a non-forgetfulness of the mind with respect to a familiar meditation object. So something you're thinking about, you're keeping it in the mind. And it has the function, what it does is it keeps you from getting distracted to something else. And so terminology you might hear in this class is remembering the meditation object, memory, or non-distraction. So just to drill down and, break it out a little bit, That means the four characteristics of mindfulness are without forgetfulness. So we're not forgetting whatever we've chosen to place our attention on. It depends on familiarity. So the more familiar we are with whatever object we have in our mind, whatever we're thinking about, the strength of our mindfulness is dependent on that familiarity. So the greater it is, the stronger the associations in our mind that we have for the object, and the better our attention is able to stay on the object. It remembers the object and it prevents distraction from taking the attention away from the object. Those are quite related. But in our mind, as we notice, as we begin to sit in meditation, we'll realize that there's a continual stream of distractions coming through our mind. They might be sensations, emotions, memories of the past, thoughts of the future. So while we're remembering whatever chosen object, and very often it's simply the breath, while remembering it, we also kind of fielding these distractions that are coming at us. And mindfulness helps keep us on target with whatever we've chosen as our meditation object. And then the fourth one is with certainty. When we are mindful of an object, we fully attend to it and we get to know it with a sense of certainty. What that means is we have a certain engagement with the object, not just keeping it in mind, but I think, if you look a little bit at how you think about things, sometimes something will just be at the top of your mind. You won't be really paying a lot of attention to it, even if it is in your mind. And then there's other times when you're completely focused on something and it's very vivid and clear to you. You're very engaged with it. And that's what we mean by certainty. So mindfulness supports that. That's the first of the mental factors. The second is related to mindfulness. It's called introspective awareness. And it's almost like the converse of mindfulness. It is our introspective awareness that alerts us to our mind being distracted from our object of mindfulness. Ideally, for some period, maybe a few seconds, maybe as we get better, for minutes. They say it's possible even for hours, although I've never experienced this myself, to remain mindful of something. But eventually that mindfulness ends. Get distracted. So what catches it that we've gotten distracted? Well, that's called introspective awareness. It's just sort of an awareness looking in, seeing what our mind is doing. And it alerts us, again, to our mind being distracted from our object of mindfulness, or our mind being overwhelmed with dullness or drowsiness. How those two are different is distraction is when your mind is pulled away to something that seems more attractive to you at the time. So it's a different object. Whereas dullness and drowsiness, what they are is that's just when your mind is kind of like all sinking and getting tired and dull and kind of darkened and so on. So maybe the object that you want to look at, again, say the breath, maybe the object is there, but it's all kind of murky and you're not really engaged with it. So that's the other problem of the two, distraction and dullness. So the stronger our mindfulness, the easier it is to notice these hindrances, that is distraction or dullness, because there's a big contrast between the feeling of being mindful, say of the breath. You could be really engaged with the breath. If you become familiar with that feeling, once you even start to get distracted or drowsy, you notice it. And again, it's just a function of familiarity. And then what happens is introspective awareness kind of comes into play. And then what you do is you can do something as simple as just saying, well, I better kind of concentrate a little bit more. I better strengthen the hold that I have on my chosen meditation object. So because they're so closely related, this means that the strength of our introspection increases in step with that of mindfulness. So this is how the two qualities mutually support each other. That's the second mental factor or aspect of the mind, just a characteristic of the mind. The third is concentration, which is kind of, once you've established stability through mindfulness, then you can concentrate on the object because it's there in your attention. So it dwells on the object single-pointedly, obviously single-pointedly because that's mindfulness keeping you locked on that object. But it's sustained. And then what that does is that leads towards what we call wisdom, but it has a lot of synonyms, wisdom that is. So the fourth is wisdom. And what it does is it discriminates, characterizes, evaluates whatever features the meditation object has. Again, we're using the example of the breath. So it might analyze whether the breath is shallow or deep, whether it's happening up towards the top of the chest or lower down. Are the lengths of the breaths changing? Is it like irregular or regular, and so on? That's just an example of what you might notice through the mental factor of wisdom. Wisdom has like a lot of kind of implications in Buddhist teachings, but here we can use the synonyms of intelligence or comprehension, understanding, or discerning analysis even. So those are the four: mindfulness, introspective awareness, concentration, and wisdom. And I've got a few analogies just maybe to help you picture those four. I don't know if all of the analogies or any of them will help you, but I'll just go through them quickly. So if we're looking at an analogy of mindfulness, concentration, wisdom, and introspective awareness, that could be likened to a laser beam. If a laser beam has a steady mount, then the spot of the laser beam is pointing at a certain place. And so that's like mindfulness. Then the intense and highly focused laser beam is like concentration. The target of the laser beam is the meditation object, whatever you're observing or illuminating with the laser beam. And the result of illumination and any effects it produces is like wisdom. Another example is a tripod holding a camera steady, could be likened to mindfulness. The lens that focuses the image so it's really sharp and clear is like concentration. The film that captures the color, detail, texture, light, and shade of the scene is like wisdom. Now, here's another analogy in particular for mindfulness and introspective awareness. So they're very closely related, these two. And this is a classical image. A rogue elephant that is being trained is like the mind. So we know sometimes our mind can get off track, it can get a little bit diluted or whatever. So that's the mind. A sturdy post is like the meditation object. We choose whatever object we want to stay with. Again, the example could be the breath. A rope tying the elephant to the post is like mindfulness, keeping the two together. However, sometimes the elephant might get a little restive. And so there's a goad or hook that trains the elephant to stay with the post. If the elephant is trying to pull away, maybe trying to break the rope or pull the post out of the ground, that's what introspective awareness does. Kind of swings in if things are not going so well. So those are analogies. And then last week we talked analogies for the 4 mental factors. And then last week we talked about 2 types of meditation. These are 2 very broad types. The first one is stabilizing, and the second one is analytical. So stabilizing is just simply keeping that object there in your attention on that object. And then analytical, you're actually looking at a series of different objects. Let's drill down here a little bit. So in this lineage, that is the Buddhist tradition, there are two main types of meditation, stabilizing and analytical. And they're sometimes called serenity and insight meditation. Both are necessary for the complete development of the mind, according to the masters. In general, stabilizing meditation is the cultivating of calm abiding. So that term calm abiding is stabilizing meditation, just taken to its culmination. In Sanskrit, the word is shamatha, and in Tibetan, it's shine. That's stabilizing meditation. And then there's analytical meditation. And its culmination is called special insight, or in Sanskrit, vipassana, or in Tibetan, lakton. You might have heard the term vipassana or vipassana, depending on whether it's Pali or Sanskrit. This is the particular application for the Indian and Tibetan tradition of that Sanskrit term. So stabilizing meditation, the focusing of the mind on a single object, is what we Westerners, commonly think of as meditation. And analytical, depending on your experience and exposure, analytical meditation can be less well known. So here, analytical meditation covers varying degrees of analysis. Might just be, simple observation of the qualities of the breath, like the example I gave before. At the minimum, it can also involve following a specific line of thought without any formal reasoning. And in this, in particular in the Tibetan tradition, there's the 7-point cause and effect. So it has 7 points, mainly causes, and then the effect. The 7-point cause and effect meditation to generate compassion. So it's a method of either increasing your compassion or generating it if you don't have any. So it's very useful. So in its full form, analytical meditation involves formal reasoning. So that's kind of like an internal debate, similar to the debates carried on by Tibetan monks in the debating courtyards of their monastic colleges. So for Tibetan monks, debate is a core activity of their education. It's up there with study and then going to teachings. So in this type of very advanced analytical meditation, well, I say very advanced, but I think all of us here have done this type of analytical meditation. That's where we use logic, technically syllogisms, for example, to challenge, our own previously unquestioned views or strengthen views that we want to strengthen. Or we will look at something and explore absurd consequences when we take them to an extreme. This is also a common thing that we do, just in order to refute something and unconvince ourselves of something. So in the Mahayana literature, calm abiding, again, the culmination of stabilizing meditation, and special insight, the culmination of analytical meditation, are often declared to be essential to advanced meditative practice. In the Sutra Explaining the Thought, this is one of the Buddha's sutras, for example, Buddha declares that all of the many kinds of meditative concentration that I have explained are included with calm abiding and special insight, albeit at lower levels for ordinary people like me. So calm abiding, according to Geshe Lundrup Sopa, a geshe is an honorific term, but also a term of academic accomplishment. A geshe here in the Tibetan system is it's like a terminal degree, like a PhD, although it can often take many, many, many more years to complete. So according to Geshe Lundrup Sopa, therefore he's an expert, calm abiding is just a one-pointedness of mind on a meditative object. Simple, sounds simple. Whatever the object may be, if the mind can remain on that object one-pointedly, spontaneously, and without effort for as long a period of time as the meditator likes, okay, it is approaching the attainment of meditative stabilization. And so there's a union of the two described in the Tibetan literature and the Indian literature, the union of calm abiding, stability, and special insight, analysis. I mean, to me, they sound almost contradictory. How can you go through analysis or exploration and yet remain extremely calm and stable? So calm abiding is held to be a necessary prerequisite for attainment of higher insight. But meditators must initially cultivate stabilizing meditation. In a way, it's the same thing, but not as strong. So we begin, it's a progressive activity. We begin with stabilizing meditation and then hope one day to reach calm abiding. When one has first developed calm abiding, one's not able to remain in that state while performing analysis. That, to me, that makes sense. I mean, how could you go through like a logical progression? How could you examine the qualities and the aspects and characteristics of an idea, of a phenomenon, of something out there in the world? How could you do that and still remain totally stable? Well, they say through repeated practice, one develops the ability to maintain the two types of meditation in equal portions at the same time. This is that's a high level attainment. Nonetheless, we can still benefit by improving our mental stability and our power of mental analysis. So even maintaining the two types of meditation in equal portions at the same time isn't special insight. Special insight occurs, vipassana, occurs when one's analytical meditation itself generates mental stability and is conjoined with physical and mental pliancy. They say there's this extraordinary sense of physical and mental bliss at higher levels of meditation practice. So at this point, when one has physical and mental pliancy, that is the ability just to place the body on a meditation seat and the mind on a meditation object, and then just joyfully meditate. So at this point, when one enters into a powerful meditative concentration, characterized by stability, and the appearance of a wisdom consciousness, basically a very powerful analyzing consciousness. Then you get this combination which serves as a powerful counteragent to afflictions. What we mean by this is we can use this as a tool to actually remove the qualities in our mind that aren't serving us. By doing this incredibly focused yet stable meditation. Not only that, it's a potent tool, they say, for developing the ability to perceive reality directly. We're not going to get into any kind of discussion about Buddhist understanding of reality and what's called emptiness, but this is a crucial tool in order to explore that. Just as kind of an aside, how we use these in, well, I'll say kind of the Buddhist formula for generating realizations, but really how we might use these mental factors in coming to any sort of realization or understanding or comprehension, really, of any topic, of any phenomenon that's in our lives, anything that we want to kind of really learn about. The Buddhists kind of divided up into 3 steps. It's a triplet of learning, contemplation, and meditation. It's a fundamental progression in Buddhism to develop realizations. So first, we learn about something. You make the time and you generously come to, one of my classes, and listen to me go on. And then you begin to hear me, and then you might do some more reading, you might experiment yourself, you become exposed to the topic. So that's learning. Then through repeated reasoning and analysis, and this is what we naturally do after we've learned something that's engaged and is of interest to us, we begin to understand and familiarize ourselves with the topic. And then finally, when you're very familiar with the topic, you bring it to your mind in meditation. And it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of a continuum, although it's divided up into 3 steps. But in meditation, you dwell, you bring it to your mind. You might perform analytical meditation if you're trying to learn the steps of a chain of reasoning or something, for example. And then once you've solidified that, you dwell on its essence to try and cement it in your memory with stabilizing meditation. So you learn something through reading, through video, whatever. You begin to think about it now and then, turn it over in your mind. And then when it's kind of starting to solidify, then you meditate on it. Most likely first with analytical meditation. But suppose you want to have the ability to bring kind of a strong image of the Buddha to your mind, or some other inspiring image, whatever, is going to help you, feel confident, help your motivation, whatever image you choose. You bring that to your mind and you might examine it analytically. Or if it's an image, like I said, of the Buddha, you might examine the different parts, the colors, the contours, and so on of the Buddha's face, the body, all of the particular features. And that's done in meditation, and then you become extremely familiar with it. And then once that's all extremely familiar, then you dwell on it. And this is going to happen in the space of a single meditation session. Then you dwell just on the essence, just kind of the feeling. What does that feel like, without trying to pick it apart through analysis or, discover anything about it. What does that feel like, its essence? You use that to cement it into your memory. And that's through stabilizing meditation. You just kind of use mindfulness to keep it there. The gestalt, is kind of just a snapshot of it. So mindfulness is crucial in all these three stages. So when we talk about the mind, particularly in Buddhism, there's actually two levels. And we can talk about, well, let's just call it the familiar nature of the mind. And we had this definition last week. So in Buddhism, mind is not conceived to be just a general reservoir of information like Google, or just the brain mechanism. What it is conceived of is to be the individual moments of subjective perception, the continuum of which makes up our experience. So those mental events or mental experiences that are happening from moment to moment, never standing still, they make up a continuum. And that continuum that makes up our experience of life, of the world. That's what we could call the familiar nature of the mind, kind of those events that we're experiencing. And this particular nature of the mind for Buddhists, this mental consciousness is that progression of mental events is the most important, because it's the one where we experience and are directly affected by the wholesome and unwholesome mental factors. If through mindfulness, we can winnow the contents of our mind and place our attention where we want our mind to go, then we have incredible power over not only our experience, but about what our mind becomes through that experience. And then we have something that might be called the fundamental nature of the mind. We just discussed all of the mental events, but there's an analogy. Those mental events are like clouds floating through the sky. They kind of appear almost without any kind of warning sometimes. They transform. If you ever watched, I'm sure you've watched a cloud, you know how it kind of changes shape. And then it'll actually vanish again into the sky. So those mental events we liken to the cloud, but there's the sky. And this is the fundamental nature of the mind. What the Buddhists say is that the fundamental nature of the mind is clear and knowing. Clear meaning non-material. There is no kind of actual material residue of our thoughts. All of the mental processes are non-material. Clear also means without obstruction to the arising, transforming, and subsiding of thoughts. We know this. We can observe this ourselves. Often the unwelcome thoughts might pop into our mind, or we might want to keep a thought in our mind, but then it gradually fades and disappears, or we get distracted to something else. So we can see that continually in the mind, the thoughts are arising, transforming, and subsiding. And that container, the sky, offers no obstruction to that. Not only that, that sky is neutral. That is, it's without constructive or destructive emotions. These constructive and destructive emotions arise from causes and the conditions that support them. Maybe how we're feeling in our body, memories that come up, activities that we're performing, and so on. But the basic fundamental nature of the mind that hosts our thoughts is neither constructive nor destructive. It's neutral. Again, it's like the sky. Say if a bird, a beautiful bird flies through the sky, it doesn't change the sky in the same way, like as if a nuclear missile flew through the sky. No effect. Bird you might consider it like a beautiful, pleasant object, a nuclear missile, something like terrifying, horrible, horrific, but neither of them changes the sky. And we can discern this ourselves. We can look at this. It's a little bit slippery because those mental events, objects, thoughts in our mind are so powerful. They grab our attention right away. But if we can just step back a little bit, and we'll do a meditation on exercising that ability. If we can just step back a little bit, we can kind of assess our mind as the thoughts are flowing through it and observe the momentary fluctuating nature of thought, an endless flow of mental instants, together with emotions, both constructive and destructive, arising, as I said, from causes and conditions. But they're not in the very nature of the mind. We might say, oh, I'm an angry person, or I'm a happy person. We might have tendencies in either of those directions. But there's always a trigger. There's always some kind of condition that brings up the anger. If we were truly inherently always an angry person, we'd be angry all the time under any conditions. So those are kind of the two levels of the mind, the familiar nature of the mind, and then the fundamental nature of the mind. They both coexist. We're going to try and observe them tonight. So that's kind of my review. So I don't know if that prompted any kind of questions or maybe observations. Maybe what I said is not in your experience. And sure, I mean, our minds are all so unique. But if anyone has any question or comment, just, raise your hand. Well, I'll read a little passage from His Holiness, the Dalai Lama.
I've actually got my hand up, sweetie.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's a proverbial hand, so to speak. Yeah. Okay. Look, I will comment. I found that synopsis excellent. Thank you. It helped. Yes, sir. Yeah. It helps me put together a lot of things that I'm slowly working on in terms of comprehension. So I really appreciate that. Okay. Now, Stephen, the thing that comes up for me that does not seem to have a category with what I do with meditation is I willfully choose to go to what I have labeled a no thought place. I let go of thoughts. And whenever they come up again, I just sort of let them go. And one of the words that comes up that I kind of use is just to tell myself to just simply go deeper, to be open. And I'm not open to just any old thing, right? Open to the ultimate truth, because I don't want to be open to whatever. Okay. So, and this doesn't, in Tibetan Buddhism, this does not seem to fall into either category of, in terms of what I'm doing. Can you comment on that? And I realize that, yeah, it's like I say, I know it's not either Vipassana or Shamatha. And while I'm on Vipassana, let me make one more comment. I've gone to a Goenka class, retreat, Goenka Vipassana. Are you aware of this one?
I am not familiar with
Uh,
that.
it's irrelevant. What part of the focus is, of course, initially you focus for the first 2 or 3 days on the breath. But what I have found helpful, and this is interesting to me, is, and I've noticed this because I took Venerable Katie's class on mindfulness, is that my mind gets distracted with movement. So to actually put my attention on my breath, I'm paying attention to the sensations of it going in and going out. It's distracting. If I put my attention, as the Vipassana people recommended, on the triangle underneath my nose, so there's an object. Yes, sir, exactly. Then what happens is I can experience what one hopefully will experience with a shamatha meditation. So that's just a commentary on me.
Yeah.
But yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, James, so much for all of those comments. Let me see if I can go from the last back to the first. Yeah, that's actually a classical, even in calm abiding, shamatha, or stabilizing meditation, that's a classical instruction, is that you place your attention here. It's higher up in the body, and it's also constrained. It's also very subtle. And we talked a little bit about this last week as well. So I'm sorry you weren't able to hear the explanation. But yes, definitely, if you want to promote stabilizing meditation up here, you place your attention up here in the, and then you feel like the sensations in a small area of the skin, the nostrils, the nasal passages, and so on. So that's it seems to me that's sort of what you were saying. Now, going back a little bit, Vipassana, yeah, here, I guess you could say that this particular tradition has maybe taken that term to mean something very specific, which is special insight, which is a very high level of kind of a hybrid of stabilizing and analytical meditation that goes along with shamatha, calm abiding. No doubt that there's, vast Vipassana, practices and experts and masters out there, and I really don't have a lot of experience with them. I would just say that in this context, Vipassana refers to special insight, whereas in your context and in a wider context, it might refer to an entire practice like you were describing. Now, the first question that you asked was, oh yeah, okay. So we're not going to talk about that a lot. We kind of covered it like in the first class a little bit when we said there is a different kind of, I use the word colloquial mindfulness, which is that type of non-judgmental, bare awareness. That's also, and that's an absolutely, valid phenomenon that happens in the mind, where you just simply step back a little bit and you just watch what is happening in the mind. Should any judgments arise, any kind of clinging or aversion to whatever thoughts come up, you try not to engage with that. And that actually comes in. It's not like formally covered in this class, but it's actually kind of a technique that's used, for example, to deal with certain types of meditative problems, difficulties, and so on. But it absolutely is it's a type of meditation that also exists in this particular tradition. I've had some very kind of low level teachings from Venerable George on Mahamudra. And in a way, it kind of involves that sort of awareness. And now I'm really kind of going out on a limb. For me, is I believe there's other meditative practices in the Tibetan tradition that use that employ that type of awareness. Here, we're just talking about the most classical duo of stabilizing and analytical, or in their culmination, calm abiding and special insight meditation. I would encourage you, talk to some of the real experts, like not me. Talk to some of the real experts about that. And that's, Venerable Katie or Sangye Kadro, or, that's definitely yet another meditative approach. I don't know if that, you had said a lot of interesting things. So, did that kind of cover what you were asking, Jay?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay.
All good. Thank you.
Well, let's just go to a meditation now. And this is a meditation on the clarity of the mind. Remember, we said that there's kind of what's familiar in our mind, what we pay attention to are all kind of the mental events and experiences in our mind. And we think, well, that's it. That's all there is just the next thought. But there's a view here in this tradition that there's something behind all of that. And again, it's kind of like, the thoughts are the fish in an aquarium or the clouds in the sky. There's some kind of background, ground mass, there's something that supports all of this. So let's see if maybe we can experience it. Again, I said it's a little bit slippery to experience it, but its qualities are that it doesn't offer any obstruction to the arising transformation and subsidence of our thoughts. And just by observing the changing of our thoughts, and they're coming and going, and we can sort of maybe get a little grip on this clarity of the mind. So just a few words of preparation. So if you would, start to settle into your meditation posture, whatever you prefer. And I'll say a few words and then we'll do that meditation. So the reality of our existence is that we're a combination of body and mind. Each of these is in turn a combination of many parts, all constantly in a state of flux. Unfortunately, our ego is not satisfied with such a simple explanation. It complicates matters by fabricating of a view of an I or self based on our conceptions, our likes, dislikes, preferences, prejudices. We think, I'm attractive, I'm ugly, I'm a good dancer, I won't succeed, I have a bad temper. We believe these projections and assume they're permanent and unchanging. And we do the same with people and objects in the world around us. We believe he's ugly, she's good. We build up our own elaborate and very solid picture of reality and hold on to it unquestioningly. So, by meditating on the clarity of the mind, it's an effective antidote to our concrete projections. Again, that continual change and transformation. Fundamental, in a way, ability to allow that to happen to our thoughts. This is, as I said, an effective antidote to our concrete projections. So we can gain a direct experience of the clear, non-material, transient nature of all thoughts, feelings, and perceptions, thus weakening the tendency to identify with them. Of course, there are some thoughts we might want to identify with. In particular, these are ones that are unhelpful, that we would want to weaken somehow, diffuse. So as the subject, that is the mind here, the subject that is perceiving the meditation object, as the subject, the mind softens, so too do its projected objects. What we project onto what we might think about a person or some scene we observe. And those projections slowly lose their concreteness. The feeling of dislike toward the bad person may still arise through habit, but we have the space to recall. This is a projection of my thought, which is clear and transitory. It appears in my mind like a cloud in the sky and soon will pass. The object does not exist in the way I see it. Even this realization, just having the slightest doubts in what we've accepted as gospel beforehand, is incredibly valuable. So this meditation will be especially effective for softening our view of our own self. Normally, our self-esteem is low based on past mistakes, personality faults, bad habits, and the like. But anger, jealousy, selfishness, depression, and the other problems that haunt us are mental experiences and therefore clear and transitory as immaterial. And the basic nature of our mind is neutral. It's just open to whatever we want to fill with it. So these states of mind all depend on, for their existence, they depend on our belief in them. By recognizing this in meditation on the mind's nature, we learn to let go of and stop identifying with these experiences. Our intrinsic nature is clear and pure and is with us 24 hours a day. The negativities that rise and fall like waves on the ocean of our consciousness are temporary and can be eliminated. Consistent practice of this meditation will eventually generate a certainty about this pure nature to the point where it becomes our reality, our actual experience. So it's kind of an inversion of what I know me, experience right now, where the mental events are dominating in our mind. And instead, it's our mind, then the roles switch, and our mind and its openness becomes the baseline. And those mental events are something that are now amenable to manipulation and evaluation. They don't control us as strongly anymore. So let's begin this practice and begin by breathing in deeply through both nostrils, bringing the air down to the stomach. And we bring the air down to the stomach. This is for stabilizing purposes, just to relax more than anything, to ground ourselves. Our attention is low in our stomach. And as I said earlier, if we want to increase the concentration and stability to a single point, then we bring our attention up to the place just underneath the nose. So just inhale and exhale slowly and gently. And then return your breathing to normal, in and out through your nose. And as we just discussed, observe your breathing without thinking, without conceptualizing, not judging, not evaluating. This is a way just of neutralizing our mind so that we can then turn it to the direction we want to use it. The body relaxes, the mind calms. And almost magically, the awareness becomes sharp as we attend to the breath at the nostrils. So let's try and turn our attention to the clarity of our consciousness. Your consciousness or mind is whatever you are experiencing at the moment. Sensations in your body, thoughts, feelings, perceptions of sounds, and so forth. The nature of each of these experiences is clarity without form or color. Space-like, pure awareness. Focus your attention on this clear, pure nature of the mind. Initially, it might be difficult to find the actual object, that is, the clarity. If so, meditate on a mental image of clarity, an analogy. One way to generate such an image is to visualize space. Imagine lying on a hilltop and staring up at a sky that is completely clear and free of clouds. Concentrate on this vast, unobstructed emptiness. Infinite. Imagine that it flows down and embraces you and your surroundings. Everything becomes empty like space. Hold this experience. Feel that the nature of your mind is like this clear, empty space. In this vast, empty, open space, thoughts and distractions will arise, but don't react to them. Neither follow them nor reject them. Remember that they are clear by nature, without substance. Simply watch them come and go. Then return to the awareness of the mind's clarity. Just experience it. Don't think about anything during this meditation. There's no need to wonder what the mind is. Simply observe it, its clear nature, which is like infinite, empty space. That's all that's needed. Be natural. Meditation is simple and natural. It is nothing special. Mindfulness means holding the mind on an object continuously without forgetting it. The automatic result of mindfulness is the perception of the meditation object, which is free of concepts. A light does not need to think, I am dispelling darkness. It simply illuminates. Perception is an inner light that enables us to see things more clearly. It dispels the heaviness of how things appear to us, thus weakening our clinging or aversion to them. This completes the meditation. And you can try this or any type of meditation you like for short periods, 5 to 24 minutes. 24 is sort of the classical length of a meditation session. 5 is maybe the minimum length, but even within a 5-minute session, you can break that up into 30-second meditations where you focus your mindfulness on the meditation object for 30 seconds. Take a break, maybe a deep breath, exhalation to get rid of any distractions, and then start again. So you could say that a meditation session can go from 30 seconds to 24 minutes, or as we were instructed by the masters, as long as you want, you can meditate mindfully on something. Well, that finishes up the meditation. How did that go? Does anyone want to mention anything? If it can take a few tries to really notice that. It's somewhat abstract, but actually it's right there. Jay.
Okay. That went really well for me because it's very related to what I described earlier about going to
Yeah,
the thought place.
exactly.
I thought, golly gosh, has he just done that for me? So, no, it was already on the agenda, I figured. But that was really excellent. Thank you. That was
Okay, that's
helpful. And
great.
I've got that. I'm glad the things are recorded because I'll use that again. And yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, it's a little bit spooky, wasn't it? I mean, you asked exactly about that type of meditation, that sort of bare awareness type of meditation. And that does come up as well. It certainly came up in that particular meditation.
Let me also say that I'm currently reading, I had a friend who died, and I'm reading a Book of the Dead that I've cobbled together a little couple of minutes worth. And it talks about consciousness and intellect and the purity of it. So this connects in really beautifully with what I'm currently doing. So yeah, it's fortuitous.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. That's good. Well, let's go on now and talk a little bit about working with the thoughts. What we just did, I hope, will give us like a little bit of space, a little bit of disengagement with the thoughts themselves so that they don't become completely all-encompassing and all-absorbing. Having even that little bit of light little bit of distance in between what we might say are the fundamental nature, fundamental operating of our mind, and the thoughts that populate our mind, then allows us to work with thoughts a little bit more. So we can talk about functional and dysfunctional thoughts. I mean, there's a lot of guidelines on which are functional and which are dysfunctional, but a lot of that is up to us. We observe our own experience, our own mind, and see what helps us personally, but what helps us in our interactions with all of those around us. And so I won't really define functional and dysfunctional. I'm sure you are much better equipped to define it for yourselves. So contrary to most people's perception of mindfulness practice as a way to stop thinking, and even when we did that meditation we just did, there's kind of an instruction not to think about anything in particular. There was still quite a bit of thinking going on. I don't know if it's any different for you guys, but there's still a lot of, shall we say, mental events going on. And we're not trying to suppress or cease them at all. That's a very different practice that's not really embraced, as far as I know, in this particular tradition. That is the practice of trying to actually cease mentation altogether. So we won't really talk about that. But so that's not what mindfulness meditation is about. Through mindfulness and introspection, we actually become more aware of the presence of thoughts. We learn to discern between different types of thought processes, thinking that is functional and useful versus thinking that is dysfunctional, maladaptive, delusional, we might say. Our functional thinking helps us navigate through different life situations and work out how best to proceed. For example, when we need to figure out the next step of a meditation, what should I do? I'm falling asleep in the meditation. What should I do? That's one example. Our dysfunctional thinking, on the other hand, tends to be involuntary and habitual. It's a part of our reactive habits to the circumstances in our life. For example, when we get distressed over an imaginary future scenario. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but I've certainly experienced that. It's like, doesn't exist now and maybe never will, but keeps you awake at night. These involuntary dysfunctional thoughts are what keeps us stressed out, unable to rest or sleep, and it sustains the tension and agitation in our body and mind. So even just making that distinction and now having a way to make space in between the mind and those mental events, functional or dysfunctional thoughts, is, in a way, it's an incredible step forward. So when introspection, this is introspective awareness, this is what kicks in when you're mindfulness, and it's intimately related with mindfulness. This is what kicks in when you detect the arising and presence of compulsive, involuntary thinking during our mindfulness practice. So again, this is our workshop. This is where we get to develop these techniques and hopefully bring them off the cushion. So when that happens, we use our introspective awareness, we detect this, and we can then take the next step of acknowledging the fact that our attention was drawn into such thinking. In the practice of mindfulness of breathing, the natural out-breath offers us an excellent opportunity to practice letting go of such thinking, releasing all these thoughts from our attention in the same way we release carbon dioxide from our lungs. So that there's that very powerful analogy. So we want to, get rid of that waste air out of our body. We can link that with the exhalation, to getting kind of those waste thoughts out of our mind. We can even reinforce this idea by reminding ourselves with a word or short phrase. For example, release, whatever works for you. Often, a visual image is offered by the meditation master. They might say, Imagine it as black smoke coming out of your nostrils, going away and just like vanishing, gone, done. So we can use a short phrase or image when we notice compulsive involuntary thought, breathing out and returning our attention once again to the breath sensations. Why can we do this? Well, because of the clear nature of the mind. Just because the moment before we had a compulsive thought, it's not written in stone that the next thought will be compulsive as well. In fact, it's completely open. So this is one way the cultivation of mindfulness and stabilizing meditation can benefit us. I remember when we cultivate mindfulness, in particular mindfulness of the breath, that also strengthens our introspective awareness because they are kind of intimately linked. So even in the early stages of our practice of mindfulness, we can do this. We can nurture our mindful focus on a specific object of meditation, such as bodily sensations in the body scan. We haven't done, in this particular course, we haven't done a body scan, but you just kind of bring your attention generally from your feet all through your body. Just what are you feeling? What are you noticing? So we can use that, or we can use breath sensation in mindfulness of breathing. And we can use that as a practice to release unnecessary physical tensions and calm mental agitation. Again, relaxing the body and calming the mind. If you only have 5 minutes to meditate, you're rushed, you've got a lot to do, or maybe you're just not feeling it, you don't have the energy, maybe you're exhausted after a difficult day, you can still at least do that step of sitting, relaxing the body, and calming the mind just with a few breaths. And then achieve at least a neutral state, and then go about the rest of your day. So this is a good way to help us reverse the negative effects of chronic stress many of us suffer from. So it's going to enhance our focused attention or concentration, which is accompanied by pleasant and harmonious functioning of body and mind. Any questions or comments now?
So just one of the techniques that I've seen used and used myself as part of meditations is categorizing the thoughts as, that's an anxious thought, or that's a planning ahead thought, or whatever the case may be. And then, I'm starting to find that the more I do that, the more I can recognize the thoughts, and then if it's a thought I've had before, then I can just more easily let go of it. So.
Yeah, that's thank you so much, Bill. That's great advice. And that's another common suggestion of meditation. And what it does is, what we were just talking about, it helps us first realize that, well, that's maybe a dysfunctional thought, and had it many times before, and pretty sure having it again and again and again and again is not going to help at all. So that's great advice, Bill. That is. And also there's kind of another subtle effect that maybe you've noticed as well, is that when you might be in the midst of something, having a strong experience, maybe an emotional experience. But if you're even able to say, that's an emotion, that's a thought, that's an experience that's happening in my mind, all of a sudden, the power of that thought, if it's dysfunctional, vanishes. There's kind of, okay, so this will sound weird, but one of the meditation experts that I've had a few classes with has this meditation where he tells us about a bowl of strawberries, delicious red strawberries. Imagine that in your mind. There's maybe little drops of water on them, and you can smell the fragrance of the strawberries and see like the lovely green leaves on them. And beside it is a chocolate fountain. And there's warm chocolate, dark chocolate, going through the chocolate fountain right beside the strawberries. And then he snaps his fingers. I can't snap my fingers. And he says, it's just a thought. And then bang, okay, your mouth is no longer salivating. You're no longer feeling hungry, and so on. So that's the effect I'm talking about. Just by labeling, just by saying, that's not the totality of my experience. That is just a mental event happening up here. And that gives you an incredible amount of power over those thoughts. Well, what we'll do is we'll revisit the first meditation we did. It's just mindfulness of breathing with relaxation. And if you like, you can just do that. Oh, Sheil, go ahead.
Sorry, Kyla had a question. I don't know if you saw.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I did not see. I got my kind of window nice. Thanks so much for calling that out.
Sure.
Keela.
Oh, it was okay to pass it, but thank you for calling that out. I guess going back to if it's appropriate, going back to the clarity meditation.
Sure.
And like what I mean, because it is sort of elusive, right? Like a little bit, like.
Oh yeah, if
Right.
this is your first exposure, like don't feel bad.
Well,
Yeah.
no, it's not that. It's more like what does that feel like? Like in your experience? Like I was curious in a way. Like when
Yeah.
does clarity feel like? Because I had an experience, but being that it's sort of not so much of an object or a thought. It's more, I don't know what it is. I don't know exactly. So that I guess I just wanted you to talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah.
From your, like an internal sense. Like my experience was, it felt sort of like maybe like a container or like a light or observation. Like I couldn't, it was sort of elusive, I guess is the word that I want to say.
Yeah. Because we like to label things and make them into concepts, but this is an experience. And the experience is undoubtedly going to be different for everyone. But first, at first you're kind of feeling like, well, there's nothing there. It's just a void. It's just like lack of thought. But then, and this is, maybe it's like through, training, but there's also, meditation manuals and instructions and so on. And I think you kind of touched on this. There's almost a sense of luminosity and a sense of openness. In the same way that when you think about space around you, say, here in, Sheil.
My question is, are you
No,
familiar?
I'm still going. I'll get to your question in a second. No problem. I'm just trying to put into words, the feeling. It's kind of like saying, well, what does sugar taste like? But what it is, so first there's a voidness, but in a sense, it's kind of like an openness. What I associate, and this might just be from all of the trainings and the way it's expressed in this tradition, I associate that kind of light with awareness. Because the Buddhist formula for that is the mind, the fundamental mind is clear, which is that kind of that openness. Like when I think of it, if I try and like conceptual it right now, so we live up in the mountains and, you know, in New Mexico, I don't know where you are, but I just got back from a trip to Colorado, and it's just kind of that openness when you're at like in a peak or like in a vista or something like that. That's kind of the feeling. I don't know if that's making sense. And don't worry, Sheila, I'll get to you in a second. But like what His Holiness says is, yeah, initially, and I'll just like give you his perspective, how he puts it into words. When we're able to prolong this time, that is the time in between thoughts and recollections of not remembering the past or thinking about the future, we might get a glimpse of what he calls it voidness. So there's a gap of the arising of mental elaborations. So what he means are are mental events and manifestations. He calls it the coarser level of mind. I called it like the familiar nature of mind. And then he describes, yeah, an experience of stillness. And that's what I feel too. It's like sort of like kind of calmness and relaxation, you know, tranquility. You kind of know when you're focused on it, because what happens is there's a withdrawal of the senses. So just what you might see if you have your eyes like half open, or anything that you're feeling in your body, that sort of drops away. In Sanskrit, that's called pratyahara. So that's like another aspect of that feeling. It's like an absence, which is interesting. He says, yeah, he kind of likens it to an openness. And that's why the analogy of space is used. It's not exactly like space, but it is an openness, but it's openness to thought. And then it's almost like kind of a flexibility. I don't know how to really say it, but it's sort of like a flexibility to then maybe choose to engage or disengage, or even, you know, control what thoughts then arise in your mind. I was going to say something else. Maybe it'll come to me later. Okay, Keela, that was a great question. And then kind of it's experiential. And so I hope that helped a little bit. And maybe you'll feel something different. And I'd encourage you, if you do get a chance to talk to the real masters, talk to the ordained at the center, some of the, the senior teachers. Me, I'm just kind of a member and instructor. I'm sure they would be better than me at helping you out. So I hope did that get your question?
It did. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Sheila, you have a question too.
Hi, yes. What's the best way to meditate? Like there's so many formats, like close your eyes, half close your eyes. Like does it all matter at the end, like whether you close your eyes? Because there's that thought, well, then when you close your eyes, you are eliminating distractions, but when you kind of open your eyes a little bit, like when we're meditating and say we're focusing on the breath, what's the end goal? Like we're focusing on the breath. So then what happens to our mind and our, like, do we, I guess I've tried both and I don't understand what I'm supposed to be accomplishing. Or some say there's nothing to accomplish, right? Like, can you I'm really confused what my form should be.
Okay. So there's a lot that could be said Just in terms of your posture, is that sort of an aspect of what you're asking? Also including the way you keep your eyes and so on?
Correct. Like, does it
Okay.
really matter how you sit, whether you sit up, whether you sit on a chair or sit like, full lotus, half lotus? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'll just, if everyone's okay with this, I'll just go over this quickly. It's a great question though, and it's always good to return to this. The advice I'm giving you is sort of what generally works. So you try it, and then if a particular issue or obstacle comes up, then then you would, in that case, you would like say, okay, maybe one of the meditation experts center saying, this is what I'm experiencing when I'm doing this. But I'll give you some like general guidelines. And of course, and that's kind of embedded in your question, they should be adapted. If something is not working for you, try something else. Typically, just the seat. Really, you want to be comfortable and stable so your body isn't, pain in your body or discomfort is not distracting you. That's broad, right? So you can be seated in full lotus, half lotus. You can be seated in what's called in Japanese seiza with your legs folded underneath you. There's many ways. It's really what's most comfortable and most stable. They say the best is, of course, full lotus, but many of us can't achieve that. I mean, we could, but then we'd end up in the emergency room immediately after. So, so whatever posture you find comfortable, you're going to raise yourself a little bit with a comfortable cushion or something that will just get that geometry right. You can be seated in a chair. And often, that's how we start. Your feet are flat on the floor or on a cushion, your thighs, or make sure your thighs are well supported by a seat. You're sitting forward, so you're not like reclined against the back of the chair. Or you can be, as you mentioned, you can be sitting cross-legged or kneeling. Again, the basic test is, where am I comfortable? You won't be perfectly comfortable. And over time, you'll experience, in general, less discomfort. But, try some experimentation there. So then your arms are resting in your lap or on your thighs. Your shoulders are back and down. And your sternum is slightly raised. That's what we call the physical posture of vigilance, so you don't fall asleep. Again, your shoulders are relaxed, your arms are akimbo, kind of like this. And that lets air circulate, especially in this warm weather, so that you don't get overheated. The spine is really the most important. You're upright, energized, but relaxed. So it's a balance. It's like tuning a violin, right? You don't want to be too sharp or too flat. So the vertebrae, just imagine them like heavy gold discs, coins in a stack. But your spine isn't like stressed or forced into straightness. It has its natural curve. Think of it as supporting the rest of the body, like a hanger supports a coat that hangs loosely on it. Generally, your eyes probably should be closed or slightly open. In the beginning, it might be easier to concentrate with the eyes closed because your mind will tend to get excited. As you become more relaxed and comfortable in meditation, you might want to keep them slightly open. And this is a dynamic process. You'll gradually get more comfortable with how you sit. So don't expect, I'm giving you the best advice I have, but it may not work for you in all cases. And it may take time for you to become comfortable in that meditation posture. Okay. Eyes closed, though, sometimes your body gets confused with meditation and sleeping. So that's why you keep your eyes open slightly. There might be a little bit of fluttering, but that'll go away after a while. And then your lips, your jaw, your teeth, your mouth, your lips are just lightly touching. Remember, you're breathing through your nose. You're breathing quietly through your nose. Your jaw is relaxed, just do a scan of your, say from, your shoulders upwards, just to make sure you're not holding any tension anywhere. Your teeth are almost touching, but not quite. And then there can be a very gentle smile on your face. This kind of, a gentle smile kind of elevates the mind. So there is that mind-body connection. Then the tongue is touching the upper palate behind the front teeth. This is really to reduce saliva and reduce swallowing, because that, when it starts to happen, becomes another distraction. But also the tongue pressing up on the palate gently stimulates the brain. And then your head is slightly inclined forward. The chin is kind of gently pulled in. Again, you're pulling it in, but you're not trying to distort the spine from its kind of natural curvature. Pointing the eyes down keeps the mind from getting too excited. Again, a balance, right? You want to get that perfect balance. You never achieve it, not for long. You want to get that perfect balance between excitement, too much excitement, and then good mindfulness, good attention, and then not enough, sort of dull, sinking, lack of attention. And this is maybe I don't know if this will help you. This is kind of an advanced instruction. Just in terms of the head with the chin pulled in and the eyes slightly down, you're sitting straight up and your spine is energized, but not distorted in any way. It just feels like it's doing the supporting of the rest of the limbs, shoulders, body, and so on, and the head. If I can get it just right, and I don't always feel this, is that it feels as if the back line of the body, so starting from the crown of the head, going back through the scalp, the neck, the back of the shoulders, the muscles of the back, that's what's supporting me. It's almost like I'm being pulled up, but the support is sort of going back through the crown of the head. And it's like, that's where I'm being held. And so kind of just a verbal image of it is your back is strong and your front is open. That's just the physical. And then you asked, well, where are we going? Well, I mean, the instructions, in a meditation session are going to depend on the type of meditating you're doing, but just breath, relaxation through the breath. What you're doing is what matters. I didn't say that very well, but it's the process that you're doing in a mindfulness meditation that's important. First of all, you're identifying the meditation object, which is the breath. So you have a clear and engaged view of it. You're putting your attention on it. You're using mindfulness and thereby exercising mindfulness, keeping the breath at the center of your attention. So that in itself is a goal. That there will be distractions within seconds, all kinds of distractions. So either your mindfulness will keep those distractions toned down. They will have little force and they'll just pass away and you'll barely notice them. That's kind of the ideal. And that's courtesy of your mindfulness. Or the distractions, like for me, oh, sore hip. What am I going to do after the meditation session? Whatever. So whatever comes up, then you get a chance to practice your introspective awareness. You detect that, first of all, I am thinking about a beach in Mexico instead of, my breath. That's important. And if I think through experience and knowing my own mind that I can just put my attention back on there, that's good. Or use any of the variety of other antidotes to that.
Sorry, Stephen, like William was saying that Venerable Katie, when we do like a Vajrasattva practice, Venerable Katie will, kind of have us do a little bit of like a calm down, like just a little bit of a meditation. And she has said, oh, you categorize your thoughts, right? Like thinking, planning. So as we are sitting down, meditating, watching the breath, and these thoughts come up, is it a good idea for us to continuously go, oh, thinking, planning, or do we just kind of watch it and bring it back to the mind, the breath? Sorry.
Yeah. And so those are kind of, once you've detected through introspective awareness that it's not the thought that I want to be focused on, you can do either of those things. You can categorize them. So if that helps you, and you find through categorizing, it reduces the number of thoughts coming up or reduces the force of them coming up, then that's great. So it's a little bit experimental on your part. And so you would say, okay, well, Venerable Katie says one thing you can do is to categorize. And if that helps you over time, it might help in one session, it might sometimes help and sometimes not. But over time, if that kind of reduces the force of those and frequency of those distractions, then that's what you want to do. If you find simply you're able to not get caught up, disengage, and then just let that thought pass by, and that works for you, then that's what you do. You will, through your meditation career, you've sounds like you've had, and you will continue to get like different advice on how to deal with distractions. So you just kind of write all those down, or keep them in your mind, and then experiment with those distractions yourself and see what works for you. I hope that kind of like answers your last question.
Yes.
But where I was going, maybe I was going too slow. Sorry. Is it's actually the process of using mindfulness to maintain your attention on the meditation object, detect when your attention has wavered, gone off the object with introspective awareness, and then either bringing it back just through effort, or using one of those techniques that you just described, bringing back your attention to the meditation object back into mindfulness. It's that doing that process is the practice. And how you know you're successful is that over time, and this will vary from session to session, good session, bad session, over time, what you will see is that the force, the frequency, the duration of distractions will slowly abate. I don't know, was that like too many words, or it didn't make sense? Or, yeah.
No, that was really good, because I think where I am right now is I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know, do I just let them go? Do I categorize them? Because then my mind becomes busy trying to categorize them.
Yeah. I know it's tough. And like we all go through like different cycles too. When, just like overall our minds are more distracted, or we're having like just a good series of meditations. So That's natural, Sheil. So what I would suggest, though, is however you want to do it, just pick one thing and just try it for a little bit, because it's not going to yield, any of this advice isn't going to yield like an instant solution. And it's part of you sort of, coming to grips with that solution and just giving it the time and space to work. So, whatever it is, you might want to talk to Venerable Katie after, one of her meditations. Just ask that great question to her and then say, well, could you maybe recommend like one thing? I'm experiencing this. Could you maybe recommend one thing that I could try? And then give it, maybe a dozen sessions or something like that. I don't know if that'll help. I'm sure there's other viewpoints and better advice than that, but to me, that's what occurs to me.
Thank you so much, Stephen.
Okay, well, we were going to have, so I'll do it this way. It's kind of, we've gotten sort of, through the end of the class. I think those questions that you asked, though, Sheil, were like really great. So I felt like I should cover them, but we didn't get to our last meditation. So I'm going to say this. Absolutely, like if it's the start of your day and you need to go, then just go, and that's great. Thank you for attending. Just on your own, dedicate the merit of this. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and just like give you a 5-minute meditation, as I said, and you can just sort of use what you learned in this session. Just meditate for 5 minutes and then see if you can maybe either experience some of these things that I was going on about, or just see what you experience yourself. So let's see, let's pull up the meditation here. This is the meditation on the clarity of the no. It's a mindfulness of breathing with relaxation, the first meditation we did 2 classes ago. And so again, our minds are bound up with our bodies. And if anyone needs to leave, now's the time. Our minds are bound up with our bodies, so we need to incorporate our bodies into meditative practice. In each session, we will do this by first settling the body in its natural state, so physically. So you can think about those things I said about posture, but really, the qualities we want to feel if we've got the posture that suits us. The 3 qualities are the physical quality of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. So we can think of relaxation as being grounded, stable, and so on. Stillness, the physical quality of stillness, is just simply not moving. You might have to put up with a slight bit of discomfort, but this is just getting the mind and the body used to it. So that's stillness. And then vigilance, because as I said, it's a balance. We don't want to be too relaxed. We don't want to be like too tense and focused. So it's a balance. So we begin physically by relaxing our body and yet maintaining vigilance. As I said, that energetic spine, straight but not unnaturally so. And the sternum slightly raised. The shoulders down and backward. It's almost as if the shoulder blades are cradling the heart. That physical posture will generate vigilance in the mind. So be at ease, be still, be vigilant. These 3 qualities of the body are to be maintained throughout all meditation sessions. Once you have settled your body with these 3 qualities, take 3 slow, gentle, deep breaths, breathing in and out through the nostrils. Let your awareness permeate your entire body as you do so, noting any sensations that arise in relation to the respiration. With these breaths, luxuriate in them as if you were receiving a gentle massage from within. Now settle your respiration in its natural flow. Continue breathing through your nostrils, noting whether the sensations of respiration, wherever they arise within your body. Just attend closely to the respiration without willfully influencing it in any way. Let the body breathe as if you were fast asleep. And yet, stay mindfully vigilant. Thoughts are bound to arise involuntarily, and your attention may also be pulled away by noises and other stimuli from your environment. When you note that you have become distracted, instead of tightening up and forcing your attention back to the breath, simply let go of these thoughts and distractions. Especially with each out breath, relax your body, release extraneous thoughts, and happily let your attention settle back into the body. When you see that your mind has wandered, don't get upset. Just be happy that you've noticed the distraction and gently return to the breath. Again and again, counteract the agitation and turbulence of the mind by relaxing more deeply, not by contracting your body or mind. If any tension builds up in your shoulders, face, or eyes, just release it. With each exhalation, release involuntary thoughts as if they were dry leaves blown away by a soft breeze. Relax deeply through the entire course of the exhalation and continue to relax as the next breath flows in effortlessly like the tide. Breathe so effortlessly that you feel as if your body were being breathed by your environment. All right, that's the end of the class tonight. Any last questions or comments? Thank you so much, Jay. I appreciate you sticking around. I know you probably have a busy day planned.
Great. Thank you, Stephen.
Of course. And so if there is, let me just make sure I haven't missed anyone. All right, we've done so much. You guys have done so much hard work sticking around and listening to me, but then, comparing what I say to, your reason, your experience, and so on, and seeing if you can integrate it into your own practice, that's amazing work. And that surely generates virtuous karma, especially given the motivation we started with. So what we'll do is we'll take that substance of virtuous karma and put it to really good use through the dedication. And so we'll use a more traditional dedication here. I kind of alluded to it. And the dedication is going to go out not only to us and us, reducing our suffering and increasing our positive qualities, but to every other being that's out there, in the hopes that we may help them too. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions that we engaged in during this meditation class, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that same enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow. And may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. All right, well, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.